Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome in all. As you're dialing in, please drop where you're calling in from in the chat so we can say hello. Thank you for being here. As we're welcoming you all to the Zoom, I have enabled closed captions for this call. So if you need instructions for putting closed captions on your screen, we're dropping them in the chat for you now. Hello from Zimbabwe, from New York. Hello from Amsterdam, from North Carolina. Thank you for being with us today. Hello from Laguna Beach. Welcome, everyone. As you're joining us, if you want to drop where you're dialing in from in the chat so we can say hello. I've also enabled closed captions for this call, so if you need instructions for putting closed captions on your screen, you can find them in the chat as well. Hi and welcome from Ohio, from DC, from the UK, from Atlanta. So good to have you all here today. Good morning, everyone. Good evening. Hello from Delhi. Thank you for being here. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to Remake. Remake is a nonprofit advocacy organization fighting for human rights and climate justice, and we're very grateful to be in community with you all today. We have a great panel ahead of us, and I'm going to begin to bring forward our panels and panelists and pin them to the screen in just 1 minute. Hello from San Francisco. Thank you all for being here. All right, let's begin. Today, we are here to talk about the predominant fast fashion business model, both domestically in the United States and abroad, which relies on the overproduction of cheaply manufactured apparel that degrades quickly, implementing a take, make, and waste model so producers can keep pushing new products onto customers. Today, 100 billion garments are produced annually, and increased order volumes and squeezed timelines place intense pressure on suppliers who are incentivized to compete for business by cutting corners and driving down wages. Further exacerbating these issues, costs associated with rampant climate breakdown are already being pushed onto manufacturers and thus workers around the world, squeezing down on wages even more. This is the fashion sector's race to the bottom. Today, we're going to hear from leaders, from wonderful women who have been leading the fight for labor rights on the ground in local communities, to next generation changemakers who are fighting on the front lines in communities bearing the brunt of climate crisis, to those who are leading the charge for driving policy reform on these issues in capitals like Washington, D.C. This call aims to celebrate the strong and powerful community who are making the future of fashion better for all. And please welcome our panelists for today. We'll drop their bios in the chat. We have Abhi, who is joining us. Abhi, if you want to wave. Abhi is the South Asia coordinator of the Asia Floor Wage Alliance, a labor-led global labor and social alliance across garment-producing countries in Asia and the consumer regions of the USA and Europe. We're also joined by Representative Pingree here today, U.S. House Representative for Maine's 1st Congressional District since 2009, who this summer launched the Congressional Slow Fashion Caucus. And we are joined by Jana Chimiti, who is an environmentalist, waste and slow fashion educator, who is sharing about the fashion waste crisis and has worked with organizations like the Global Landscapes Forum Nairobi chapter, Planet One, and Greenpeace Africa to empower local community groups on climate justice and advocacy. Thank you all so much for being here today. The fashion industry is a multi-trillion-dollar industry with a massive impact on people and planet. Representative Pingree, the Slow Fashion Caucus is the first official forum for the U.S. Congress to recognize and address the issues within the take, waste, make model of the fashion industry, What inspired you to start this Congress?
Well, thank you very much for having me join you today. And thank you to all the panelists for the great work that you're doing and for everybody who's on the call because you're interested in this topic. I have to say, before I started to dig in a little bit and better understand how much fashion today impacts our global climate challenge, how much of it ends up in our waste stream, I was always a little annoyed at the amount of fast fashion and throwaway fashion, but I really didn't have any understanding of the impact of how much of it is in our waste stream, how fast the waste stream is going, how much of our clothing today is made from synthetics, particularly fossil fuel-based fabrics, and how much we've shut out our sustainable fibers here in our own industry. I'm an organic farmer myself. I look at a lot of things through the lens of how to engage more of our own farmers and realizing that we're not supporting our wool, cotton, hemp, linen, all of the fibers that we could be using as much as we can, and how much we're doing to harm domestic manufacturing. Some of this has to do with trade loopholes. Some of it has to do with the enormous power of the fossil fuel industry. Some of it just has to do with, I think, consumers often not understanding the damage that they're doing by buying throwaway clothes, whether it's the damage to the workers, to the environment, or just to our basic system here and all of the things that we're wasting in it. I personally, I come from Maine. For those of you who know Maine, we like to wear just a pair of jeans and a flannel shirt, and we're very fond of thrifting, reusing, remaking. We love to mend our clothing and show it off. I didn't have any garments handy, but I was just teaching my grandson to mend, so I just want to show off the patch that he made recently on his work pants. So it's a family affair for all of us. I've also talked to some of my colleagues about this, and I think many of them didn't understand. So for all the reasons that we already know, I thought that Congress had to take a stronger stand, and I'm happy to describe more of what we're working on, but it really, it is an important effort to raise awareness, to get some policy at the federal level, and to work with some of the states that are already doing great work.
Thank you. And we're dropping in the chat a link to read more about the Slow Fashion Caucus for a story that covered it in Teen Vogue, so folks can learn more about this really important forum. The remake changemakers who are on this call today often hear us talk about how legislation and systems change is such an important way to make change. We talk about creating change outside of just our personal consumption habits and how that systems level change is extremely important to drive this movement forward. I'd love to hear from you, Representative, what you would want to tell the next generation change makers who are on this call today about why political change making and using their voice as advocates matters.
Sure. Thanks for that question. And let me say that every action that you're taking is important. Whether you're somebody who makes a point of rewearing or thrifting or mending your clothes, whether you're focused on social media and letting people know more about it, whether you're talking to your own community or you're organizing workers or talking about this from an environmental lens, every single action matters. But whether it's a state or the federal level, it's really critically important to have policy that reflects our values. And all too often, unless there are voices speaking up, my colleagues in Congress or in state legislatures just don't even know that anyone is interested in this. And I will say, since I launched the Slow Fashion Caucus, I am so impressed at the wide range of people who have talked to me. I was just at a speaking event yesterday with farmers, and one of the farmers got up and said, thank goodness she's doing all these things on, farming and sustainable agriculture, but I really love the Slow Fashion Caucus. Or young people who say to me they already have a club in their school or they're raising awareness about this. So we have a lot of big goals. We have a lot of things that we'd like to do at the federal level, whether it's more action through the EPA or more action through the USDA to support our sustainable fibers. Things like California just passed with extended producer responsibility, but these are big, often challenging pieces of legislation. And the only way I can convince my colleagues that they're important is if they hear from all of you. So I really appreciate any action that you take. It matters greatly what states do. What's happening in California has been really valuable for us. They become what we call laboratories of democracy. So people can see what a bill would actually look like. States start to implement these things. And often what we find is national and international producers, when they find that states are taking individual actions, sometimes they'll throw up their hands and say, okay, why doesn't the federal government just deal with it so we don't have to deal with a patchwork of laws? So that often gives us the kind of pressure that we need. As you know, combating the fossil fuel industry is an enormous challenge. We deal with it every day in our lives with a real pushback on the kinds of things we're trying to do to fight global climate change, and a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. So many of you have authentic voices. You're able to talk about it in your daily lives or the actions that you're taking, or you're able to talk about the downside of fashion, what it does to communities or countries, what the waste stream looks like, what's happening to workers. So many of you have really valuable voices. So your engagement with us is really important. And as we grow the Slow Fashion Caucus and get more of our members engaged in working on policy, anything you can do to encourage your own member of Congress to join up or just to ask us some questions is really helpful. I will say, you know, we're dealing with international issues. We're dealing with, huge tragedies in the weather challenges that we're facing right now, of course, related to climate change. But often our colleagues get distracted by other things on their plate, and they'll sometimes say, slow fashion, I got real work to do. But when we talk to them about the impact it's having, about how it engages young people in a conversation about what can I do about climate change, they often see how valuable this is. I will say for many of my female members of Congress, when I brought this up to them, they said, oh, you know where I get my reward, where do I go to shop for thrifting? And many of them have either favorite stores or in Washington or back of their home district, because as you know, we got to wear a uniform to work every day and it gets a little tedious, and you don't want to be part of encouraging more fast fashion by being a shopper. So many of my colleagues are very engaged in that, and I am as well.
We love to hear that Remake's no new clothes ethos is taking Capitol Hill by storm, it sounds like. Thank you for
Exactly.
sharing that perspective. We love every single action that you're taking is important. That's something that I really want all of our change makers on this call today to hear. Chimite, thank you so much for joining us. One such next generation change maker is joining us today from Nairobi, where she works to highlight the reality of waste in the fashion industry in Kenya. In your lifetime, you've seen firsthand how overproduction has changed the secondhand clothing market in Kenya. Can you tell us a little bit about how the decreasing quality and increasing quantity of secondhand clothing there is impacting your local community? Thank you. You should be able to come off mute.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. So I live in Nairobi, Kenya, and it's one of the countries in the global south that receives a lot of secondhand clothing from all over the world. And like our top countries that we receive this clothes from are like China, the US, UK, Canada. And so when you go into the market, and this is where a lot of people from Kenya buy their clothes from, we have a lot of secondhand markets all around the country. And the biggest one in Nairobi is called Gikomba Market. And so this is where a lot of people, including myself, buy our clothes from. And the very first time when I went there was, I think, around 2015, when I first joined university. And at that time, I really didn't see like any problem because I was there to shop. There were like so many nice clothes. But it wasn't, I think, until I became a volunteer with Greenpeace Africa that like my mind got expanded, and like I got to see like the impact of so many things on our environment, in our communities. And so going back like much further to when I was growing up, my parents have been shopping secondhand. And then when I got into high school, my friends and I would do that. And I have this particular dress that I have worn, no, I bought when I was in high school, and I've had it for like 12 years now, and it's still as good as new. I have like 3 shirts from my mom that she wore when we were growing up, because she used to be a secondhand trader, and so she would pick some items from her stock to like wear and to gift us. And right now, when I look at the clothes that I find in the market, because I continue to buy that like a lot of times, I can't, like, there's such a huge difference between what I see now and what I used to see back then. Like, I know if I buy a shirt right now, it won't really like last a very long time in my wardrobe. It's like I have to take a much longer time to look at the fabric type, to see the condition of the clothes for me to be able to buy it. And the difference is that there's a lot of clothes that come in and like, so it's purely fast fashion like right now. So you'll see like a lot of Shein and like Zara, I think H&M and all of the fast fashion brands. And this material, like all these clothes are like, they're either torn or they're super oversized, they have stains, like the fabrics just look like they're just about to fall off. So it doesn't like give you enough like reassurance that when you actually buy it, it's going to last you a long time. And back to my point where I said it wasn't until I became an environmentalist that like I began seeing the problems like in the environment. And I have always been so passionate about fashion. So when I got into it like in around 2018 and like I now began to see the other side of the fashion industry, and my eyes were opened. And now each time I go into the market, I see a very different picture from what I used to see before. There's a section of the market where so like there's a river that passes right next to the market. And say, as I mentioned, the clothes right now like they're just so like they're not like like they are so unsellable, they're unwearable. So the people in the market have found a way to like make it more appealing to the people that come and buy them. And so there's a lot of alterations that is happening in the market. We have like tailors, people who iron clothes. So if you buy something and you don't like it, and this is mostly people who buy clothes, then they go resell. So they will buy clothes, and then if they need any alterations made, they will use the tailors in the market, and then these tailors will like upcycle them or something like that. And then the offcuts that remain are like dumped. And this is just because I think we have a really poor waste management system, or like we don't have like a good grasp of how we should manage our waste. So a lot of this offcuts are like thrown in the environment or next into the river. So there's like just this whole scene that people don't really think about. And I think people like we don't really see how much fashion is overwhelming our ecosystems, like our communities. And a lot of clothes are being produced right now, and we don't really think about that. But I love that there's a really big upcycling community in Kenya, and they have been doing that for a long time, as you can see from the market, for example. And people don't know that they're upcycling, but in a way, they're really contributing to ensuring that even though these clothes that come into Kenya are not like desirable like enough to be worn or to be sold, they're still finding ways to like ensure that these clothes are kept in circulation for longer.
Thank you for sharing, and particularly how the market and secondhand clothing has changed in your lifetime. I think that overproduction is such a significant change that we've seen occur in our lifetime, and it must be a change that we reverse in our lifetime as well. I'm very excited to welcome an additional panelist who's joining us today, the wonderful Nazma Akter, who is the founder and executive director of the Awaj Foundation and president of the Sommilito Garments Federation. She has been fighting to improve worker rights, especially rights for women's workers, over the last 30 years, and I'm thrilled to welcome her to our panel today. Nazma, increased overproduction and sped up timelines, as we've been hearing about, have placed a very intense pressure on garment makers as well, ultimately driving down worker wages. In 2013, minimum wage negotiations took place in Bangladesh for the first time since 2018, and after months of organizing, workers and union federations rallied for at least a 23,000 taka, which is a 208 US dollar minimum wage figure to be the new monthly salary. But the government instead set the new wage at 12,500 taka, nearly half the amount of what workers really need to make ends meet. Since then, workers have faced a number of additional struggles exacerbated by intense unrest in the aftermath of the wage decision, as well as climate disasters, flooding, etc. as well. Nazma, if you could please speak to how the inadequate wage increase and political turmoil over the past year has impacted garment workers. And is there a disparity between the effects that are felt by women garment workers? And I've just come off mute, so hopefully that'll be able to hear from Nazma.
Hello.
Hi,
Good evening. How are you?
good to see you.
Glad to see you and good to see all of you and including US government. The workers' wage in Bangladesh, it's a complicated and also our legislation also very work friendly, not the worker friendly. So the wage after 5 months you can review, or it can do at least 3 years, but most of the time the government or manufacturer neither do that. And then the 2023, when the minimum wage was reviewed for the new wages, our salary was 8,000 taka for the minimum wage, which is less than $100. And the inflation, price hike, the house rent, everything is so expensive, and it is very difficult to survive workers' life and livelihood, including, it's a production pressure and long working hour. So that's why the garments workers are decided 23,000 taka is a minimum wage, at least they need. And that's why they were able to campaign. But, our government was not properly negotiate with the wages. Their brutality, 4 workers was killed, 3 was shooted by the police, and number of workers was injured and blacklisted, false cases, and only the sexual harassment was not happen. Freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of association, all aspects the workers was vulnerable when the government was increased. The primary announce was the draft was 10,000 taka, and they were deny it, and they were demanding for 23,000 taka. And the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, her brutality, it was very tough time. Still, number of workers has legal charges, and payment is not paying. And the women's workers is very important, this job, but the slavery job is very difficult, because even that Europe, America, who are coming to our country due to the cheap labor and excessive working hour, that's the competitive market in Bangladesh. So we are fighting for that, and still we are fighting for the 23,000 taka. But now this year, 2024, the workers demand 25,000 taka for minimum wage. So we need to be focused on it. As you know, Bangladesh is a reforming. The new government is sitting, and there is a lot of demand, because people doesn't have last 16 years about freedom of expression and freedom of movement, and people are raising their demand. But still also we have so many problems. And 18 demand was agreed by the Bangladesh government, union, as well as the company, where our workers are very innocent, and our workers are very I'm not saying stupid, because they are very low demand, like tiffin bill, night bill, overtime payment, because they forget they need to increase the salary, they need to housing, they need education. So this situation is going very demand, and 18 demand, where also we have suggestion for the new minimum wage review, and labor law amendment, daycare center, blacklisted should be withdrawn, legal charges should be withdrawn. So many issues are including there, and hopefully it will be work sooner. But again, the society in the business community, they are in the parliament, they are so powerful. When people has money, people has power, because people's power is very difficult at this moment. So I am also looking for this kind of situation we need to overcome. That's why the today call in the people in the panel, because I am also listening about the previous speaker, or they said actually different way, the global north and global south. There should be transparent business system, the supply chain, even the brand was only the minimum wage. They are not looking for the maximum wage and salary. So therefore, we need to support from the US government as well as the US consumer or Europe. So global south and north, like Bangladesh, we are like working for making new clothes for the European or American market. If I'm going to Africa, for example, Ghana, they are also selling the old dumping in their country, and their hygienic, their working hour, their wages, the benefit, the harassment, the abuse, the union rights, freedom of association, collective bargaining rights is similar. And when they are going to the women's workers and talking about the women's workers' rights, they always undermining and cheap labor, and they are not paying. So women are hunger, children are hunger, sexual harassment is increasing, physical harassment, mental, all. So people who are working in the supply chain, they are suppressed, they are deprived, and they are exploited, and they are slave. So we need fair wages and we need fair justice, but it is never happen. We are always saying, but people are saying more important the business and the money, and business community, the business hub are running this world. And that's why nobody is talking about the workers issue. And climate also one of the big issue in my country. Last 3 months, there is already 3 times flood, cyclone, and many things. Number of workers are killing due to the business community, the dumping, pollution, and destroy the nature and natural things, and ultimately affect our women's workers. And in gender-based violence is increased, and we don't have the law for the sexual harassment abuse. We don't have the proper place to do something. So, it's inequality. We need systemic change. We need power should be equally distributed, men and women, supplier and brand, and workers and management. And systemic change is very important. And the minimum wage is not the result. How to get the living wages, and how to worker can negotiation themselves, how do they have to increase their benefit, which is very important, which is a GSF, our union and our foundation, we are working, and we are improving women leadership, because male dominating and patriotic society also big problem. And in our organization, we increasing number of union membership, female leadership, and we have over 80%, over 80 union where 80% female leadership, and 18 collective bargaining where we increasing 10% to 7% to 10% yearly increment, and other benefit, and gender sensitive collective bargaining, which is we need to all country and all area, is not only Bangladesh, rest of the production country, and we need those kind of support. How to worker can freedom to right to organize, because union busting, retaliation, also big problem. That's why the workers cannot increase their salary. And we want to dignified and respectful work, not only the minimum wage. We need fair wages, and fair price is important. The purchasing practice is very corruption and very unfair treated, and which is goes to the workers. They are giving bulk millions of the order, but they are not giving fair price, and the workers need to be excessive working hour, exploitation, and hunger, and low wages. And our country, after 40 years old women, they cannot work because due to lack of food, tired, long working hour, high production pressure, and they cannot use toilet, and they cannot drink purified water. So kidney, heart, lot of diseases, even the occupational health and safety. So why the people are so much diseases? That is also people said, oh, she's ill, she should kick out. But why she's ill, nobody is look after. So nobody is accountable. We don't have the social protection. We don't have the insurance adequate, and we don't have that kind of social security and benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazma. Thank you so much for reminding us that there is a real human cost to overproduction, and that the women who are making our clothes cannot have a life of dignity in this current situation. The cheaper the clothes, the harder the lives of the women who you serve really, truly are. As Nazma shared, the minimum wage increase remains severely inadequate given the stagnancy of worker wages over the past several years, alongside skyrocketing inflation and the consistently low prices paid by brands for goods. Abi, I'd love to welcome you to the stage now. This is an existing concern with the wage in Bangladesh, but indeed goes beyond, as is reflected in the Asia Floor Wage Alliance's cross-national work. Based on wage data that the Asia Floor Wage Alliance has collected, can you please tell us about the gap that currently exists between the income workers currently receive versus what they actually need to support themselves and their families?
Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. So based on the wage data collected by Asia Floor Wage Alliance last year, the report reveals a significant gap between the wages workers are currently earning and what they actually need to support themselves and their families. So in many cases, workers' current wages fall far short of a living wage, which is defined as a minimum income necessary to meet basic needs such as adequate food, safe housing, healthcare, education for children, and transportation. So this gap is particularly alarming when we factor in workers' effort to save for emergencies or secure a future beyond daily survival, which is nearly impossible with their current incomes. So our data also indicates that while there have been small wage increases in some part, these are grossly insufficient, like inflation and coupled with the rising cost of essential goods and services has, it's supported the factor and then gain made by such wage adjustment. So as a result, the purchasing power of workers has declined, leaving them struggling to cover even their most basic needs. Workers are often forced into debt or have to make difficult sacrifices, such as cutting back on food, healthcare, or their children's education to get by. So the data also highlights how this wage gap affects workers' ability to plan for the future or lift themselves out of poverty. Without a living wage, workers are trapped in a circle of survival, unable to invest in opportunities for advancement or secure economic stability for their families. The report emphasized that for workers to live with dignity and for their families to thrive, not just survive, substantial wage increases are urgently needed. So brands and employers must take immediate action to bridge this wage gap. And then the data that I'm talking about was collected last year, but Bangladesh has gone a lot this year. So the inflation is really, really high, as Comrade Nazma explained before me. The situation put the workers' life in danger without adequate wages or even saving. So these are unexpected crises. It's just like, like a COVID crisis, right? And then now it's like the country is going through a political crisis plus environmental crisis. So the workers are not prepared or not even having a saving to save themselves and then their family. So it's a wake-up call for brands and employers, and then they need to take a immediate action to bridge this wage gap, to ensure that workers are compensated fairly for their labor in a way that reflect true cost of living today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the practice of contracts and how this plays a role in this, because poor brand behavior really does play a role in the core underlying issue of keeping workers' wages so low over the past decade. So, Abhi, what kinds of broader industry reforms in relation to commercial practices and contracts and buying are necessary for this pivotal moment where we're speaking about a need for increased worker wages? What's at stake if brands continue business as usual?
Sorry. So over 10 years, maybe. So the workers in Bangladesh garment industry have suffered from how big brands treat them unfairly, especially through bad contract terms. These terms, which mainly benefit the brands, keep wages low and then working conditions harsh. For example, brands cancels orders at the last minute as they wish, demanding big discounts and then don't stick to agreed prices. So this puts factories in financial trouble, and to cope, they they cut costs, usually by keeping wages low and then creating unsafe working condition for workers. And this is more than just about low wages. It's about a system that exploit workers and make it hard for them to earn a decent living. Now, it's crucial time for change, as we all expecting a change in the country. And the industry needs to reforms to protect workers' rights. First, brands should use fair contracts that include proper pricing and then protection against sudden cancellations. These contracts must reflect the real cost of production, including fair wages for workers. That is really must. Also, we need a commitment to living wage across the industry. That's partially the fight that Asia Flow Wage is fighting for, with clear transparency on how wages are set. Brands should build long-term stable relationship with factories to stop the constant pressure to lower prices. Finally, we need to empower workers with a system that they let them have a say in protecting their wages and rights. If brands keep doing business the way they have, workers will stay stuck in poverty, and then their rights will be violated. This moment is critical. This is really a chance to change the industry for the better, or risk trapping another generation of workers in low wages and poor conditions. Brands have the power and the responsibility to make this change happen by committing to fairer practices and ensuring the industry respect workers' rights. As the country is expecting a political change in a larger way, I think this is also the right time and then right moment for the garment industry also look for a change. And I think the trade unions who are working in the sector are looking for that change. And then we hope, like everyone hope that, like Bangladesh will have that change very soon. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you, Abby. Chimita, I'm coming back to you for a moment. Much of this conversation comes back to who takes responsibility here. I would love to hear your perspective and what you wish everyone could learn about this issue.
That's a very interesting question because I was just thinking about how when you're, let's say, on TikTok or on Instagram and you're looking at posts of people sharing their fast fashion hauls, and the people who are informed, they know the impact that fashion has to communities around the world, like how women who make our clothes, like what they're going through. And you'll find this people like, being so harsh in the comments saying how, you shouldn't be buying too many clothes, you shouldn't be doing that. And like kind of like this blame game of blaming other consumers, which I think is not like totally right, just because like obviously we all come from different backgrounds, we consume things differently. And I think it's important to know that like the problem comes from where this clothes comes from, like the brands, the companies, and we shouldn't be blaming each other. And I was reading, I think one time, about how when we ask brands to like reduce their production, they would be like, oh, but we're listening to the customers. So, like when there's consumer demand, so we have to produce more, which I think we all know it's false. And as consumers, we really like do have the power to like ask these brands to do better, to produce less, and to treat the garment workers right. And so I would say that the people that we should really be asking these questions on to why we need to have changes in the fashion industry is first the brands and the companies. And then also, I think it would be very important for governments to like really step up. And I'm saying that as someone who lives in the global south, where we receive like basically the end of life of clothes. And if our governments don't step up and like say what exactly they want, because it's important to keep the clothes that we already have in circulation. And so we can't like keep saying that, oh, we need like this clothes to be banned or something like that, since they're already here. So we need to like work as governments, like in the global north and the global south, like how do we ensure that the clothes that are already here like are meant to be distributed fairly in a way that does not burden one part of the world. And then also like there's so many cool organizations like Remake who are doing such amazing work in like just educating people on like what the fashion industry really is, and like working with different individuals and other organizations to like ensure that the industry is transparent, accountable, responsible, and that like people who are working along fashion supply chain are recognized for all their work. And so it's really important that these things are put into consideration, and that we all hold each other's hands and not continuously point fingers. Like it wouldn't serve like us to push for a better fashion industry if, for example, I am pointing my hands towards consumers in the global north. And that's why through my content on Instagram, I kind of just show exactly what is happening, what the impact of your donations is doing to communities here in Kenya, and like just how when you're informed, you'll be able to like make much better choices. And the other thing that I would want to connect with all the points I've mentioned is that education and policy, I think, go hand in hand. And so it's really important to like also just bring that up. And at Threading Change, where I'm the Africa Regional Director. We believe that like putting these things together and like also like just linking consumers and governments, industry professionals together, like being able to like, you know, just come together and like understand, like linking this steps along fashion's supply chain and like just like doing education and advocacy work and like also putting policy in it would really put us a step closer and not necessarily like just having to work. For example, as I'm in Kenya, it's in Africa, which is a global south place. And I think we have this habit of in the fashion industry, we kind of, I think sometimes we work in silos where like, you know, like organizations like in the global north would work amongst themselves and then us, we will work by ourselves. While I think at the same time, it's really important that we find each other. Like we're now living in an age where social media is a thing and it's like a village, and we can be able to like find each other just the same way you have found me, and just try to listen to each other, because you might come in from like a point of, you know, I have gone to school, I have done my research, I understand that these are the impacts to, let's say, people of the global south. But if you don't talk to someone who's actually from there, who understands, who has experienced it firsthand, then I think we will always be in this loop where, you know, like we're trying to like we are working towards the same goal, but it's like we're also like just so separated from the reality. And that's why I really love the work that we're doing here. Thank you so much for like bringing us here to like just learn from each other and like understand what is happening. And like just also getting to hear from people who work in countries where these clothes actually come from makes the work that I do like just, you know, it kind of just like seals it and makes me understand why it's so important to like speak up and let other people like understand why I am doing this. Even though it's like literally at the end of life of clothes, but like I'm also seeing how I can connect where those clothes actually come from and actually like link the people who stitch those clothes together.
Thank you. And thank you for making that linkage about how all of our stories are coming together. It's really, when we're talking about this question of responsibility, what I'm hearing our panelists ask for is fairness, justice. You know, as we talk about better quality clothes, good jobs with dignity, this is really about fairness in the agreements of how we all participate in a global fashion system. I want to begin to wrap up our panel with some questions about looking forward. Representative Pingree, I'd like to bring it back to you. How do you think that the Slow Fashion Caucus and its members can begin to foster a race to the top on fashion's issues? As we've been hearing about the race to the bottom here on the call, how do we begin to reverse this both abroad and at home?
Yeah, and thank you again for bringing everyone together on the call. I really appreciate the people who are working on the labor side back in the countries where these are challenges, or in the global south where our clothes end up often just being disposed of and with no consideration of what happened. And I think many of the issues that people are talking about today, how do we get more information in the hands of consumers? I don't know if we have very good rating systems, but often that can be helpful. In terms of looking forward, you know, how do we look at some of the big brands and have ways to rate how they treat the environment, how they treat their workers? Is there a set of standards for a good company and how they follow contracts, don't break them, you know, make sure. We hear a lot of double talk from countries like, oh, well, it's another supplier. We don't exactly know how this happens, or, you know, I mean, there's a lack of transparency in that whole chain. So whether it's about the workers or the environment, or how things get disposed of in our country, all those things are really important. In terms of our caucus and our ability to do more in Congress, I think we've just cracked open the door, honestly. We're waiting for a GAO study that the One of my colleagues, Representative DeLauro from Connecticut, and I have requested, and we're hoping that that brings us a lot more up-to-date information on the state of the fashion industry, particularly from the disposal side and the overproduction side. But so much of the overproduction is possible because low wages are paid, and there's so little value in what's being made and shipped to our country and sold in our country. I think we have a long way to go. I mean, you're doing an amazing job, and a lot of people on this call are doing a really amazing job of bringing the issue to people's attention. But I'm amazed at how many climate activists and young people and just people who think they're engaged citizens don't think twice about how much they shop, how much they throw away, or maybe think they're donating and don't realize they're throwing it away. I sometimes compare it to the plastic straw. When we started talking about plastics in the ocean and people sort of pointed out the plastic straw, it seemed like almost overnight you went to places and you either had to reuse a, reusable straw, or you had a paper straw. And it was as if we tackled it, jumped on it, and it was over. Of course, it's not completely over, but the order of magnitude of what fashion is doing in our environment, contributing to toxics in our environment, or plastics in the ocean, or so many other things compared to a straw. It's a massive difference. And so I think we have to help people to have a better understand of how to quantify this. That's one of the reasons we've been asking for more research to really understand how much is ending up in landfills in the United States, where it comes from. I think most people don't know that the majority of their clothing that they buy today is made from fossil fuels. They can have an electric car and solar panels on the roof, and they're still buying a lot of synthetically made clothing. And maybe disposing of it because it didn't fit right, or that wasn't what they imagined. So anyway, you all know the issue so very well, and I really, really appreciate your coming together. I think, like I said, we have our work cut out for us. We're no surprise to all of you. We're in an election cycle. Congress isn't doing a lot right now, but if I'm lucky enough to get back into Congress and many of my colleagues are returned, I think this will be a very high priority. And I think, as long as we have someone in the White House who cares about climate change and cares about workers' wages internationally, really wants to respond to the concerns of the global South, we'll be in a good position to do this. This isn't a campaign call today, but I'm just saying, I think we have some real opportunities in the next Congress, no matter who's in charge. And I will say, even, on both sides of the aisle, we find people who are worried about wages internationally, are worried about the production of goods in China, worried about the de minimis loophole that allows companies like Temu and Shein to export a lot into our country, and we willingly import it. And closing that loophole is a bipartisan concern. So there's a lot of ways we can act, and I really look forward to continuing to working with all of you on that.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our panelists. If we could please give all of our panelists a very warm Remake thank you for being here today. As we're reflecting on the remarks that have been shared by these incredible change makers, we'd love to hear from our Remake community as well. We're launching a poll now to ask you about your change-making why, and we hope you'll be willing to share with us what your why is. Why are you here to make a difference on these issues? And for our panelists, I just want you to see all of the thank yous that are coming in from the chat. As Aisha says, this is what we do best here at Remake, bringing voices of change makers together from DC to Nairobi to Bangladesh to Sri Lanka, all noting that we must tackle fashion's overproduction problem in order to make progress in terms of better jobs and the climate crisis. Exactly, 100%. Thank you all so much. Yes, please do share your Remake change-making why with us. We'll love to reflect on those comments from you as well, and hear what motivates you and what you're reflecting on as part of today's call. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the programming over to my colleague Allison, who is here to share with you about some upcoming Remake programming. Thank you, Allison.
Hi, everybody. I know Tessa is going to go ahead and share some slides. Thank you, Tessa. Like Emily mentioned, thank you all to our amazing panelists to take the time out of your Monday to join us today. We're very grateful that our community is filled with so many powerful change makers. And this month, I want to recognize a few that have just gone above and beyond this past September. Additionally, if you have an ambassador in your community that you would like to see spotlighted on our next community call, Emily is dropping a form in the chat that you can fill out with the person that you would like to nominate. So first off on the screen, Isabel, who I also saw her beautiful face on the call today. She's been a Remake ambassador since 2021 and is one of our state chapter leads for the Fabric Act. As an exceptional Fabric Act champion, just earlier this month while traveling to DC for something entirely unrelated, Isabel took 5 congressional meetings all on her own accord to champion the Fabric Act. This is no easy feat, and this is something that can be really intimidating, but Isabel's passion for sustainability and a better future for fashion is a perfect example of a Remake changemaker. So thank you so much, Isabel. Next up, we have 4 remakers to spotlight from New York Fashion Week, Rosie, Samir, Gianna, and Damar, who are instrumental in Remake's New York Fashion Week September events. Starting off Monday, these 4 led peaceful actions outside of Coach and Tory Burch runway shows, bringing awareness to the union busting cases at the Cambodian factories, which Tory Burch and Coach both source from. This type of advocacy wasn't enough for them. The very next night on Tuesday, you can find them walking in Remake's New York Fashion Week Sustainable Runway Show. So snaps to their continuous support, who keep this movement alive every day. And last but not at all least, Colleen has been a Remake co-community organizer in the New York hub for the past 2 years and is passing off the torch this month. From organizing ambassadors on the ground to supporting Remake's educational work, campaigning work around the globe, Colleen is the perfect example of what it means to be a leader, a mentor, and an advocate. There's really no amount of thanks that truly acknowledge the amount of impact that Colleen has had on this movement. So if you see her in the Slack, give her a hug, tell her you love her. She has done so much work for Remake and the New York hub. So thank you for all of you guys for all the hard work that you do. And then next up for the next slide, we do have one virtual program coming up this month that Remake is hosting. If you're interested in becoming more of a leader in this movement or just in general, we're hosting a Remaker exclusive Leading with Wholeness workshop led by Civic Leadership Development Consultant Max Clow. Throughout this program, we'll be crafting our own personal leadership mission statements and learn how we can put these missions into practice in our communities. There are a bunch of other virtual and in-person events happening this month, and you can find all of those on the Remake Hub or on the Remake website. Some other events include some festive fall clothing swaps, a bunch of ambassador in-person meetups, and more. If you're not a Remake ambassador yet, but want to get involved in our community, you can learn more about our Global Changemaker program and how you can get involved in the link that Emily just dropped in the chat. It's an amazing community, and we hope to see you all there. So I'm going to hand it back on over to Emily, but it was great to see you all and have a great October ahead.
Thank you, Allison. And once again, a warm Remake thank you to all of our incredible panelists today. This call today really encapsulated all that Remake is and does. We're a global advocacy organization fighting for human rights and climate justice in the clothing industry, and representing that story through all of our wonderful panelists today, I think really told a very holistic picture of all that we are working to tackle within fashion. We're so grateful for you all for carving time out of your Monday to be with us here today and for being in community. We can't wait to read about what your Remake Changemaking Why is. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And we look forward to a wonderful October ahead. Be well all. Talk soon. Bye-bye.